Well, today's cheese is Romano, and here are the ingredients here on the screen. We need 2 gallons of milk, or 7.6 litres, a quarter teaspoon of thermophilic culture, quarter teaspoon of lipase, 2.5 ml of liquid vegetable, rennet, and 2.5 of calcium chloride if you're not using raw milk or unhomogenized milk. Now this milk here I'm using is raw milk. It was given to me by a friend, and in a frozen state, so you can see that it's 0 degrees. So I'm just stirring around chunks of ice there, so just to heat it up. So it's now at temperature, it's at 33 degrees, and I'm adding the culture, so the thermophilic culture, and here I'm adding the lipase. Now what I should have done is add it to some water and let it mature, but you can add it directly if you're going to heat your cheese up and leave it for a long time. So give that a quick stir. There's a lot of cream in this milk, so I had to stir that a lot. So now we let that rest, and we let that rest for 15 minutes and let it ripen. So once it's ripened, you can see that all the cream's risen to the top, so I have to stir that thoroughly through again. Now just making sure that the temperature's still at 33 degrees Celsius. Which it is. Just turning off the heat. So now goes in the diluted rennet. Once I find it, there it is. So it's diluted with a quarter of a cup or 60 mils of cool boiled water. So stir that all the way through. Give that a good stir. So I stirred that for about 2 minutes to make sure that the cream's all mixed in. And we're going to let that rest to coagulate for 40 minutes. Okay, so 40 minutes is up. You can see a lot of creams to the top again. And I'm going to try my fancy new curd cutter. There it is. It's made for the smaller pot, so we'll just try that. So it goes in fine. However, the curd is so solid because I'm using raw milk. I'm finding it very hard to turn it around. As you can see, when I turn it around, the curd turns itself. So I've given that up as a bad joke, and we'll have to go back to the good old method of using a knife. So I'll break out my curd knife. Luckily I sterilised it beforehand, and we're cutting it into 6mm cubes or 1/4 inch cubes, so pretty small. Now the curd, because it's so solid, keeps turning around and around, probably because I moved it with the curd cutter. But I've sped this bit up. So it takes a while to cut the curd. You want to make sure it gets into the smallest cubes you can possible. I could have used a whisk. Is another way to do it, to make sure that the curd's very small for Romano, very similar to Parmesan. So now I'm using the curd cutter to try to get that through, and it's working a bit, but it's still very solid, so I'm trying to get it smaller because the chunks are too big there, so I'm going to have to resort back to the knife again. So just trying to cut that as small as I can without squishing the curd. I'm going to make sure it has square edges. It loses more weight that way. So I'm going to let that rest for 10 minutes, and 10 minutes later, back here again. And I've got the whisk out this time, and we're going to stir it with the whisk. Makes it's a lot smaller and easy to manage. So what we're going to do now is slowly heat the curds up to 48 degrees Celsius, and that needs to take 30 to 45 minutes. Now I've sped that up for the purpose of the exercise. Instead of you watching me do it forever. So as you can see, it's a lot smaller. It's up to temperature now. And now what we have to do is actually stir it for another 45 minutes. So 45 minutes later, you can see the curds very small. My arm's very sore. I'm on my right hand now. I'm normally left-handed. And we're going to pour off the whey now. So pouring the whey off there. Into a lined colander. Now this whey I used for the last video that I made, which was whey ricotta, and it was lovely because there was so much butterfat in the whey still that it made a very nice ricotta. Just getting the last bits of it out there. My hands were cleaned with vinegar. So we're going to put that into a 1 kilo cheese mould now. Now because this is really thin cheesecloth, I've actually lined it with a chucks or a handy wipe or whatever you want to call it, and that's been sterilised in boiling water as well. So just drain as much of that as you can off. And pop it in there as best you can. So once it's in there, we top that with a follower, and we're going to press that at 5 kilograms or 10 pounds for 30 minutes. And this gives its initial shape. There we go, the follower on the top. I'm going to put the spring on top and put it in the press. Now with my method I've just got to estimate, so you know, fairly loosely is about 5 kilograms or 10 pounds. As I said, that's for 30 minutes. Okay, I'll let that sit there. Okay, 30 minutes later, we take it out of the press. We gently unwrap the cheese because it's not quite formed. If you're rough with it, it will fall apart, and then you'll have to do that first step again. Now everything's been cleaned, the sink top, everything there, just to make sure that no moulds get into the cheese, and it's as hygienic as possible. Now I've sped it up there because this takes a while, and simply just turning it over. I'm going to use just the chucks itself now, and I've wrung that out. So just simply turn it over very gently, wrap it up, pop it back in the mould again, pop the follower on top, and this time we're going to press at 11 kilos or 25 pounds for 3 hours. So 3 hours later, we're just going to flip it over again. You can see it shrunk quite a bit and sped up for the purposes of the video. Okay, get any bits off it. And re-wrap it back up again. Pop it back in the mould. Pop the follower back on top. And this time we're going to press it at 20 kilograms or 40 pounds roughly for 12 hours. So we'll leave that overnight. So 12 hours later, it's daylight. And we're going to take it over, turn it over one more time. And this time we're going to, you can see it shrunk a fair bit there. You turn it over and we're going to press it at about 10 kilos or 20 pounds for another 12 hours. So follower back on top, spring back on top, and then back into the press. So that's the final pressing. Like I said, we put that in there for 12 hours. And the next stage, once we've taken it out of the press, we put it into brine. Now you saw the brine at the start of the recipe. So I've had this in there for 6 hours already. And I'm turning it over. So you flip it every 6 hours, you leave it in the brine for 24 hours. The cheese is small, it'll absorb lots of salt. And we leave it at a room temperature, about 21 degrees Celsius or 70 Fahrenheit. And we just put that back on there. The reason I got that white thing on the top is to stop it from floating. Once you take it out of the brine, pat it dry and place it in the cheese fridge at 13 degrees C or 55 Fahrenheit at 80 to 85% humidity for 10 months. Shorter if you like, probably only by a couple of months, and longer if you like to. And just follow those instructions and you should be right as rain. I usually wax mine. There's the cheese out of the press, drying, ready to go into the cheese fridge. Thanks for watching and see you next time.